A bombshell from the parliamentary budget officer. He says the Trudeau government put a gag order on him not to talk about research showing most Canadians pay more than what they get back when it comes to the federal carbon tax. Now, to chat about this in more detail is political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilley, who joins us once again from Toronto. Brian, the PBO confirmed a while ago what many of us already suspected, that we're actually paying more than what we're getting back.
He did. And if you've watched Question Period or watched the news elsewhere, then you might be a little bit confused because the Liberals always point to one report from the parliamentary budget officer that says, oh, no, you get back more than you pay. And the Conservatives always point to another one that says, no, you pay more than you get back. And here's the difference, Hal. The first report just looked at purely the carbon tax. Do you get back more than you pay? And he said, okay, based on government calculations, yes. And then it was raised. Well, what about the add-on effects? And so the parliamentary budget officer went and did another report and looked at, well, okay, you add the carbon tax on and the price of food goes up, the price of clothing goes up, anything moving by truck goes up, anything moving by train goes up, all these things. And then there's the added HST on all of this. And in that report, he said, yes, you will actually, most people will pay more than they get back, except for people at the very lowest income brackets. And so the Liberals will never acknowledge that second report. And then at a committee meeting on Monday, the PBO, Yves Giroux, was asked a question by Liberal MP Ryan Turnbull and kind of surprised everyone because he alluded to the fact that there was this report by Environment and Climate Change Canada that confirmed what he said. Yes, most of us are paying more than we get back when you add everything up, when you compound all the changes that happen because of the carbon tax. The government's own research says that, but they told him not to talk about it. In comes Conservative MP Marty Morantz, who says, well, wait a minute, a little while ago, you mentioned this. Yes, this report exists, we found it, but I'm not allowed to talk about it. Well, can you tell us what it says? It says what my report says. And of course, the Trudeau government has been fighting this report. So yes, they have told the PBO, we'll let you see this report, but you can't talk about it. So good on him for actually saying the government has its own research. It will not publish it. It will not make it public. And it's told me I can't talk about it. But yes, you are going to pay more than what you get back. And I'm trying to remember for all the various income brackets, but an Alberta family that is, middle class, upper middle class, could be paying $2,500 a year more in carbon taxes and all the add-ons than they get back in rebates. So, I mean, that's not an insignificant amount. That's a great family vacation. That's an add-on to your deck. That's, different things that we could all do with that money that we can't do because we're paying it to the government.
Now, speaking of family vacations, let's talk a bit about the bizarre outburst by Health Minister Mark Holland, who described summer road trips like they were prisons and that family vacations burn the planet. Now, we had the clip here on Bridge City News. A lot of our viewers were stunned when they saw this. Brian, the comments by Holland were, some say, were pretty extremist.
I called them unhinged in a column in the Toronto Sun. I mean, he's describing a summer family road trip vacation. By the way, let me just set this up. This all started, if you played the clip, this all started with Rachel Thomas, Conservative MP from your region, talking about a Conservative motion to take the taxes off of gas, give people a rebate between now and Labor Day so that they can afford a summer road trip. And Holland starts going on about how, well, you're going to be in the car for 10 days and 10 hours a day and no bathroom breaks. And it's going to be horrible. Did he grow up with Clark Griswold from National Lampoon's Vacation? Did he have the worst summer road trips ever? Thomas was asking about, being able to go see a national park or visit a family. And he goes off on how horrible road trips are. And it's going to be bad, kids, but don't worry, you'll pay for it by giving up the future of the planet because the planet will burn. Yeah, what on earth is he talking about? Now, the Liberals are trying to claim that the Conservative math is off on how much people will save with their proposal. He didn't talk about that. He didn't mention that. He just went off on an unhinged rant, and he didn't raise it once but twice in that question period last week. And now Stephen Guilbeault is out trying to do cleanup for Mark Holland, the health minister. And I'm not sure that that's any better because nobody believes Stephen Guilbeault. And people are bringing up old posts to social media from Justin Trudeau about road trips with his family for vacations and how great they are. And here are the Liberals just sounding completely disconnected by denigrating the idea that you're going to do a road trip. You know what I did on the weekend, Hal? I did a road trip to Lake Erie. You'd lived down here in Southern Ontario for a while. I went to Lake Erie, did some camping. I paid for the campsite, unlike the people at different campuses. I paid for the campsite, hung out at Turkey Point, got back to nature. It's refreshing, it's rejuvenating, it's as Canadian as maple syrup. And here the Liberals are denigrating it. Out of touch.
I remember the many trips down to Crystal Beach, right? It's just a beautiful area.
Oh, one of my favorite spots.
So now, Brian, a report by a panel of MPs says the Trudeau government was a little too slow to react to foreign interference, and that some MPs actually and knowingly took part in the foreign interference. So what was the government's response to this?
The response was unreal. So here's what the report said. This is from the NSICOP, it's called. This is the committee of MPs that the government has been talking up for more than a year, saying, NSICOP will look after this. NSICOP has the resources. NSICOP is the place to do this. They have the security clearance and they know what's happening. Well, this is the second report in 2 weeks that reveals new information that we didn't hear at the public inquiry, that we didn't hear from parliamentary committees, that we didn't hear from David Johnson's whitewash report into foreign interference. And this one says that, as you mentioned, some MPs either wittingly or unwittingly took part in foreign interference, that they accepted volunteers or funds or some sort of help from foreign governments, mainly China, but also India. This is a report that says that China and India both tried to interfere in the conservative leadership elections, leadership races, the last couple of them. But it also talks about the fact that there were MPs who went and gave information to foreign governments about their own fellow MPs and their views on those foreign governments, knowing that those foreign governments would then turn around and use that information to try and pressure the MP who was opposed to China or was opposed to India, etc. I mean, that's essentially MPs spying on each other. That's horrific. This should not be happening. And the government's response was, well, we need caveats on this. Look, they didn't have all the information. This is the government's response on everything, Hal. They, whether it's NSICOP and CIRA, the Hogue Commission, the parliamentary committees, well, they don't have all the information. We are coming on 2 years of dealing with this idea of massive foreign interference in our elections. And the Trudeau government keeps saying, well, nobody has all the information. We do, but nobody else does. Well, why doesn't anybody else have this? And when the report also said that the government was too slow to respond, he actually denigrated the committee. This is the committee that the PM appoints. This is the committee that the PM controls. And they're trying to say that they don't have all the information, that they aren't taking into account all the things the government's done. Well, if they don't have all the information, that's on the government. This is the government that is currently fighting the Hogue Commission, the public inquiry, on whether to release more cabinet confidence documents. The Trudeau government has been dragging its feet at every turn on foreign interference, and now they've been called out by a committee chaired by one of their own, Ottawa South Liberal MP, David McGuinty. If that name sounds familiar, he's the brother of former Ontario Premier Dalton McGuinty. No question about his Liberal bona fides. This guy is a Liberal through and through and is saying this government didn't do the right thing.
Brian, the Liberals' pharmacare bill passed the House of Commons and now has made its way to the Senate. So what does this really mean for Canadians who are trying to pay for prescription drugs?
For most Canadians, nothing, sadly. But if you are in one of the two camps of people who will get some coverage, you're still a long way away. We are at June 4th, as we sit here and talk. The Senate, it's doubtful that they're going to pass this before the summer. It could happen, but the Senate's probably going to want to take its time and go through this bill. So it either passes the Senate just by the skin of its teeth by the end of June, or the Senate doesn't pass it until later this year. What will eventually be covered? Some contraceptives, some diabetes medication. That's it. If you're on heart medication, you're not going to be covered. If you are on medication related to anxiety, that's not going to be covered. If you are on medication related to any other condition beyond diabetes or contraception, you are not going to be covered. And they're calling this universal national pharmacare. It's not. And I'm already hearing from people within the medical community who say, even on diabetes, it doesn't cover everything that's out there. So, this is the Liberals giving the NDP the bare minimum they need to keep them on side on their supply and confidence motion, their coalition agreement, until the next election, and trying to keep that election at October 2025, as opposed to moving it up sooner.
Now, speaking of the NDP, Jagmeet Singh and his party have put a proposal on the table to combat rising food prices, Brian, and it's in the form of a price cap. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, we're going back to 1970s economics, which, I'm sure many of your viewers would remember the 1970s and the economics, and others won't. Let me tell you, uh, price controls don't work. They don't work in any country that's tried them, and that includes Canada back in the 1970s. And he's putting forward a proposal that it's just going to be on the absolute basics: bananas, bread, milk. I don't know about you, Hal. I shop at all kinds of grocery stores. I don't just go to one store. But have you ever walked in and you see a sign that says "We will not be undersold"? And what do they list? All the things that Jagmeet Singh says he wants to put a price cap on: bananas, bread, milk, butter. Like, these are the essentials. And these are the things that grocery stores, regardless of who owns them, compete the most for. It's the other items that we don't buy or use on a daily basis that end up having the biggest price jumps. And, if Jagmeet Singh really wanted to deal with grocery prices increasing or inflation, he wouldn't be supporting the Trudeau government. There was a Scotiabank report a little while ago that said that the increase in Bank of Canada interest rates, that at least 200 basis points, or 2%, of that increase was due to government spending by the Trudeau Liberals. I mean, they have increased government spending tremendously. That has forced inflation up because it's, so many dollars chasing so many goods, and the government is spending beyond its means. They keep supporting this. Instead, they're focusing on an industry that has incredibly thin margins. And I know Loblaws has great profit margins. Do you know where that's from? Owning Shoppers Drug Mart and selling things like makeup. That's where their profit comes from. It's right in their annual report. All of the grocery stores, it's actually like 1% to 3% profit margin. And Jagmeet Singh wants to attack them and shrink that down to what, 0.5%? Well, at that point, the stores are going to close.
Another week and yet another poll, and this one by Lethbridge. Brian, where do the Tories stand nationally right now, and how strong are they in Quebec?
Well, this was the big shocker. So, the national numbers were not a surprise. I believe it was 42% for the Conservatives, Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives, and 23% for Justin Trudeau and the Liberals. So that's a 19-point gap. Most of the polls have been showing 16 to 20, as high as 22% in some polls over the last few months, in terms of the gap between the Conservatives and the Liberals. But this poll in Leger, by the way, and this was a poll done for my employer, Post Media. But Leger does a ton of polls. They worked with various media outlets. They worked with corporate clients. They've been the most accurate polling company in the last two elections. They have the Conservatives tied with the Bloc Québécois at 29% support each. The Liberals are behind them at 26%. Now, don't expect that this is going to be a huge breakthrough, that the Conservatives are going to sweep Quebec. First, we have to see, does this trend continue? This is always my advice in polling. Don't look for one poll, look for trends. If all the pollsters are starting to see a trend, okay, well, maybe there is a big change. Otherwise, it might just be an anomaly with that specific poll. And so we've seen the trend of that 15 to 16 to 22% national lead for the Conservatives. That's been there for a while. We want to see if that translates into the Conservatives leading or tied in Quebec in the future. But the Conservative support in Quebec is concentrated around Quebec City, up in the Saguenay. It's in specific regions. But the fact that they're ahead of the Liberals in Justin Trudeau's home province, or what he calls his home province, a lot of Quebecers always remind me he was born and raised in Ottawa until the age of 14, and he's really an Anglo. There's animosity towards Trudeau in Quebec. That is significant, and it shouldn't be overlooked. Will they increase the seat count if these numbers hold? Absolutely. Will they sweep the province? Probably not. But you know what? All they need to do is win in Ontario, win in BC, pick up a couple of seats in Alberta, a few more in Atlantic Canada, and you've got a majority government.
Political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.